and your duties, as I say, to them lie under section 2. So there's back and forth there. They've got duties, you've got duties as an organisation. We decide to bring in a contractor to undertake, I don't know, whatever it may be. It may be a contractor that's undertaking some welding work on a trailer, as an example. Okay. As a company, we have legal duties to them under Section 3 of the Health and Safety at Work Act. Right? We have duties as the employer to people not in our employ who are affected by our undertaking, Section 3. Okay. Contractor here, they may be a self-employed individual, or they could be a contracting company. I don't know, Barlow Handling, Lindy, whoever it may be. Right? So they're an employee in their own right. They've got employees. So they've got duties to their own employees under Section 2 as an employer, the same as you have to your employees. But don't forget, as the contractor, they've got duties to you under Section 3 because they're an employer. They have a duty to ensure people are safe and not in their employ. Brighton and your staff are people that they don't employ. So, let's say this guy that's doing some work on the back of the trailer, some welding or wherever it may be, right, some repair work, as the contractor, this guy has an accident. Let's say he falls off the back of the trailer as he's undertaking that welding work. Let's say he falls off the forklift truck as he's inspecting the mast of the forklift truck, wherever it may be. It's the contractor that's had the accident. Potentially, where's liability now? Possibly with you? Okay. Could be here. It could be here. It could potentially be with him as the individual. Okay. So as a HSC, if I'm looking at it from a criminal point of view, I'm now going to come in potentially and investigate this accident and decide on whether any action is necessary. Right? And if I decide that yes, I'm going to look to prosecute somebody, I've now got to work out who is going to be prosecuted. Right? So yes, Brighton could still be in the firing line here, dependent on what you do as a company in managing your contractors. Okay? And that's from the prosecution, the criminal side of things. What we've also got to remember is this guy here is a lawful visitor to your premise. You've invited him onto your premise. If he gets injured whilst he's on your premise, he potentially could put in a claim against you under civil law, right, for negligence. Okay? Right? So he's got exactly the same rights as your own employees making claims against you. But again, whether they're successful or not depends on what you have done as a business. Okay? So what we've got to look at is how do you actually manage your contractors? And again, there's a lot of information available. There's a number of guidance documents produced by the HSE. And it takes us through a step-by-step process of what we should be doing to manage contractors who come onto our site to undertake work for us. Okay. Okay. It says here, you're responsible for your workplace environment and your own employees. Yes, but taking that into account, you've got those Section 3 duties. Right? And the contractor is responsible for their people, right, and the job that they're undertaking for you. So it has to be managed appropriately and effectively. And the first thing that we should be doing, right, is planning the actual work. As Brighton, we've got to start to think about the actual work itself. What do we require that contractor or a contractor to do for us? Okay? Right? What type of activities are they actually going to be undertaking whilst they're on our site? What are the hazards, what are the risks associated with those activities? To the extent that we know, Okay. How long's the job going to be? Okay. Is it a one-day job? Is it a half-day job? Is it a couple of hours? Is it 3-4 months? Is it 6 months? Who knows? Whatever the actual job is, right? So we've got to look at the actual time that the work's going to be undertaken. Right? We've also got to think about who's going to be responsible for those contractors. Who takes responsibility for them when they're on site? Right? For ensuring that the things that should be happening are happening. Okay? We've got to think about our rules, our systems, our procedures, our standards, and how do they apply, right, to those contractors whilst they're on site. What do we want them to work to? Okay? What's relevant to them, what's not relevant to them? How are we going to make sure that the information, right, actually flows prior to the actual job starting? How are we going to ensure that we've got good levels of communication in place? Okay. Okay. So there's a number of things that we need to do initially, the planning of the work, taking some of those things into account. What we shouldn't be doing is laying down how they undertake the job. We shouldn't be telling them how they need to do that job. We shouldn't be doing the risk assessments for them. We shouldn't be writing their method statement of how that work should be undertaken. If you start doing that, you start to take a lot more responsibility. Okay? Right. So I'm expecting we're going to do some work up front, we're going to do some of the groundwork and plan the actual work that's undertaken, but what we're not going to do is do the risk assessments and the method statements for the activity itself. We may have risk assessments in place because some of our activities whilst those contractors on site might impact on those contractors, all right, and we'll take that into account in our risk assessments, but we're not going to be doing their assessments for them or their method statements. You start doing that, you become a lot more responsible, a lot more exposed as a business. Okay? Right. So we've got to ensure that they come up with the risk assessments. We see sight of those when it's all ready to, when it's been undertaken, and their actual method statements, the way their safe systems of work, how they're going to undertake the job. Okay? So we plan the work initially. At that point, we're then going to decide which contractor we're going to use. Okay? We want to ensure that the contractor that we invite onto site to undertake that work for us is a suitable contractor. That they're competent, not just to undertake the work, right, but that they undertake the work safely. That's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about whether the guy can weld, whether the guy can inspect the forklift truck. All right? What I'm worried about with my health and safety hat on is that he does it safely. Mm-hmm. So we've got to check their health and safety competencies. And if we're checking their health and safety competencies, what might we look at? What might we ask for? What are some of the things that we want from those contractors to help them prove to us that they're health and safety competent?
Ensure.
Training records. I want to see sight of their training records. I want to know how they train their people, to what standard they train to, how often do they train, when do they refresh train, you know? Have they got the appropriate records in place?